here to kink shame you. If Anki at 2 in the morning is what gets your jollies off, go you. The only things in life that are certain are death, taxes, and 100 people in your first year of medicine asking you whether or not you use Anki. Back when I was a first year, I certainly got swept up in the mass hysteria and dove right into Anki. I must say as well that I did not half-ass it. I really wanted to set myself up for success, so I consumed a wide variety of resources with tips and tricks on how to use Anki properly because I wanted to give it a really good shot. My two main resources for learning about Anki was the ANKing YouTube channel, which I'll link in the description, and also the Medical Numinist, I hope I'm saying that correctly, the Medical Numinist podcast. Up until today, I have been pronouncing that word Mendamist, and I had to look it up before, and I was shocked to hear the pronunciation be Numinist. I had no idea. It still sounds wrong to me. If you haven't listened to that podcast, it's a wonderful podcast. It talks through different memory techniques and how you can get the most out of learning within medicine. They have different speakers on every week, and there's a few episodes in there that are exclusively about Anki and how to best use it. And then it's always kind of peppered into the conversation here and there. So those are my main two resources. All up before I started, I spent about 12 to 24 hours just on research on Anki. So I really felt confident that I knew what I was doing when I started to use it. And then of course, throughout my experience as a user as well, I continued to look for tips and tricks to try to enhance my experience with the software. As far as my own personal experience with Anki, I have used it at two different points in my life. The first time I used Anki was in 2019, and I don't think that time really counts because I wasn't using it very well or for very long. I used it for about 2 months. I didn't know too much about the software when I started to use it, and in retrospect, I can say that I was not using the app correctly. But my proper stint with Anki was in 2020, my first year of medicine, where I used it for a full 9 months. So this video is my opinion piece as a real world user. If you're a student and you're happily chugging away using Anki, you're on your 600-day streak, you cannot wait to get home to open the app so you can do your Anki revisions. Every time you do open the app, you know, it's like you're in heaven. There's angels with harps singing to you. Everything feels blissful. If this is your experience with Anki, this video is not here to convince you otherwise. I think you should continue to use it, and that's wonderful that you found a method that really works for you. This is a video for someone who has not yet started to use Anki, or for someone who's been using Anki and is ambivalent about whether or not they're enjoying the experience, because as much as I love YouTube, this video is a response to the echo chamber that YouTube can be at times. What oftentimes happens on YouTube is that someone posts a video and it says, "Why I love Anki," and that video goes viral. And then everyone else who produces content in that similar sphere will see the success of that video and then want to emulate that success. So then you'll get 10 more videos about why I love Anki, why I love Anki, why I love Anki. The net effect of all of this type of content is that it convinces us, the viewer, into thinking that everyone is using Anki, or that everyone is getting up at 6 in the morning, or that everyone is having this particular smoothie, when that's not necessarily the case. I am lifting the veil of secrecy, if you will. I find this social phenomenon around Anki to be such an interesting topic, so I would love to hear your opinion about it as well. Does this video trigger you? Does it validate you? What are your personal experiences with Anki? I would love to hear it. Leave them in the comments below because I reply to all my comments, so let's chat about it. The first reason that I dislike Anki is that it is mind-numbingly boring. Something that is really apparent about me is that I fucking froth studying. I really enjoy it, and it's a huge part of my life. My ideal day is an 8-hour uninterrupted stint at a picturesque library punctuated with a 12-inch chicken schnitzel Subway with spinach, onions, carrots, honey mustard, mayonnaise, and mozzarella cheese. My love affair with studying even goes so far as when I'm planning a holiday, I like to have some studying incorporated in my holiday because it makes me feel peaceful and it makes me feel happy, and I just get a lot of joy out of it, so why not? But oh my god, Anki is just so dry. Sitting through those questions was unequivocally the worst part of my day. I dreaded it so much. For the time that I was using Anki, studying felt like such a chore and a burden. Every session that I reviewed my Anki cards, there would always be a collection of cards that I would get wrong multiple times in the same session. Maybe it just wasn't a very good card that I'd written, or maybe it was quite a tricky bit of facts to remember, but inevitably I'd end up with some cards that I would see again and again in the same session. Now, ideally, if you've gotten the same card wrong multiple times in the same session, you take a little break away from Anki and try to learn that in a different way, because something about it being just flashed to you isn't sinking it into your memory well enough. When you've got a few hundred cards left to review that day, it's very hard to motivate yourself to take time away from pressing the space bar and to actually learn that fact properly and then come back to the app than it is to just hope and pray that you're going to get it right the next time, which you never do. The whole point of Anki is that you're going to see all of these cards again in the future, depending on how confident you were answering those questions today. I'm not arguing with the concept of spaced repetition. I think that spaced repetition really works, but I think there's a lot more interesting ways to have spaced repetition than to do the same cards over and over and over again. My next reason that I don't like Anki very much is that I think that it can really contribute to burnout. I know that I am definitely not alone in my feelings of dread towards Anki, and I think that if you force yourself to do something that you don't want to do day in and day out, that is a one-way ticket to Burnout City. Medicine is a field that is ironically rife with mental health issues, partly because of the kinds of perfectionist people that it attracts, partly because of the intensity of the workload, and partly because of the systemic issues that exist in such a traditional career path. Armed with all of the fabulous junior doctor suicide statistics that we get to read in the paper on a biannual basis, we must, as students, be extra vigilant of anything that may harm our mental health. I like to set up my life and my tasks and my to-do lists so that I can end the day with a feeling of success, and I found that Anki really got in the way of me feeling successful at the end of my days. There is an option within Anki that lets you pause the reviews so that if you have a day that you don't want to do them, the next day you won't get bombarded with like 500 cards, but it's not particularly intuitive to set that up. And I also found that it didn't really allow for any spontaneity in my life for those days where I just didn't feel like doing it. My next reason is that I found the user experience to be quite lackluster. Storytime Kitties, the name for my channel, Aesthetic Academic, comes from the fact that I enjoy and prioritize a level of beauty in my environment and in the applications that I use. Anki is quite bare bones, and there was nothing about the software that caught my eye or attracted me towards using it. You can add some add-ons to your computer version that makes Anki more appealing, but what I found with those add-ons is that they actually generally slow down the performance of the computer software. And in addition to that, you can't apply those same changes onto the app version of Anki anyway. So for me, that wasn't a complete enough solution for me to feel satisfied with the way that it looked. The next reason that I did not like Anki is due to the cult-like status Anki has amongst med students. The way that Anki is discussed amongst med students, and especially first year med students, and also in forums, feels very dogmatic. There's massively the sentiment of Anki is the only way to learn, it is the only right way to study, and that just sets off my red flag detectors. It's almost as though Anki is a deity, and yeah, it just gave me the ick. The next reason that I didn't like Anki very much is that it gave me really fragmented knowledge. So during my time learning how to use Anki, advice I came across time and time again was to make sure to only have one fact per card that you were trying to learn. After using Anki for an extended period of time, I felt like I knew a lot of random little facts, but I had no idea how they related to one another. I felt like the quality of my overall comprehension was dipping greatly. I also felt like it was very difficult for me to translate what I learned in the Anki cards to real life scenarios. So for example, if I had learnt in my flashcard that flucloxacillin is a great antibiotic for Staphylococcus aureus, then when it came to real life and there was a question where someone had an infection in their leg and what antibiotics are you going to treat that with, it did not come easily to me to then be able to apply that knowledge from my flashcard to that scenario. I would have to learn that fact in another way, in a more contextual way, for me to be able to then confidently answer that question. And I guess in an ideal world where you have Hermione Granger's Time Turner, you can do your Anki revision cards and then you can look through a more contextual picture of what you just learned. But there are only so many hours in the day, and if you have 400 Anki cards to review, those hours go quick. The next reason, which wasn't too bad of a hindrance for me, but I've heard a lot of my classmates mention that this was a roadblock for them, so I thought I would mention it, is that there is a learning curve that's quite steep. Anki is an open source software, so there's a lot of add-ons that people make and then put online for you to then apply to your Anki. And there's also just so many different kinds of cards that you can make within Anki itself. So there's a bit to wrap your head around, and you can really get lost in it if you so choose to do. If you're someone who enjoys tinkering and enjoys computers, then you might actually enjoy getting to know the software. But if you're just someone who wants to plug and play and not bother getting to know a new software, then that would actually be quite a big roadblock. I've also noticed that for how many people were buzzing about Anki back in first year, only a small handful of people are still using it today in third year. I don't know what has happened between then and now, but what I do know is that my cohort is very dedicated, and I can't see why they would drop a software that was working really well for them and getting them results. The next reason that I don't like using Anki is because in this study of n=1, there was a causal relationship between decreasing multiple choice scores and using Anki. Yes, you heard me correctly. So like I said earlier in the video, I was really committed to giving Anki a really good shot. So I thought I would give it 2 exam periods. So when my mid-year exam periods rolled around, I did the test studying exclusively with Anki, and my test scores were just not where I knew that they could be. They were lower than I was anticipating. So I thought, all right, like maybe I'm just not using the software correctly yet. That was something I thought a lot during this whole process, whether or not I was using the software correctly. That occurred to me all of the time. So then I thought I'll do some more research and continue to use it and see if I get any improvements. On further research, turns out I was using it just fine. The types of cards that I was making were fine. I was making all of my own cards, which I'd learned from multiple sources was the best way to practice Anki. Anki doesn't work as well when you use cards that someone else has created for you. So I was doing all of the right things in terms of what is recommended when you use Anki. And then my end of year exams rolled around, and still my test scores were just not where I knew that they could be. At that point was when I realized I didn't want to use the software anymore and discontinued my use of it. Ever since I left Anki, my life has been so much better. My test scores are back to where I am really satisfied with them, which is really reassuring. I also am studying so much less than I was when I was studying with Anki. I spent a lot more time on Anki for no returns, and just my overall med school experience has been way more positive now that I'm not using Anki. A couple of really positive things about Anki, because there is so many positive things about it. For one, the fact that it's open source is just amazing. Whoever created this software is so generous to have put it online and made it available for everyone to use. So I just think that is incredible. And another thing is that some people just bloody love it. I'm not here to kink shame you. If Anki at 2 in the morning is what gets your jollies off, go you. My only hope is that one day you end up on the Netflix show How to Build a Sex Room, so I can see what other creative ways you've come up with to electronically flog yourself. The moral of this video, and what I hope you've gleaned from it, is that Anki is not the only way that you can study and be successful in medical school. There are so many different ways to study, there's so many different kinds of learners that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to doing this. My opinion is that Anki is an overhyped software that really works for some and doesn't really work for others. The best way for you to study is to find a way that you really enjoy doing it, because you only get one shot at this life, so you should definitely prioritize making it a fun one. Love you, see you next time.